a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Right now, I get to talk to one of my favourite Australians. Each week on a Monday morning, we check up on current political issues with the Australian Christian Lobby. And this is an organisation, if you know me, you know it's very dear to my heart. So it's obviously a special treat for me to welcome to the program ACL's Victorian Director, Jasmine Yuen. Jasmine is, I know her well, she's one of the strongest, most committed to truth, one of the kindest women I know. She and I worked closely together at ACL, and so it's a privilege to have her as my first guest this week. Jasmine, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's always good to be back in Vision. It's so good to have you as the host today.
Yeah, it's lovely to talk to you and just to see you on the screen. Jazz, your area of oversight is largely Victorian politics, so let's talk about what's happening in your neck of the woods. We often laugh together at ACL about the Victorian being the crazy place in Australia, and I do think it's crazy. You're on school holidays actually at the moment, so maybe your kids are around as well, which is thank you so much for taking the time to join us. But first of all, I just want to, and maybe this will be our whole conversation today because it might take a while to really dig deep, but we'll try and get to some other things. But you've got concerns regarding the Victorian State Treaty. Now, this treaty is being touted as being a significant step towards reconciliation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Victoria. And of course, as followers of Jesus, reconciliation is really important to us. And, I have visited remote communities and I am very aware that there are gaps in healthcare provision, for instance, but there are many, including a number of prominent Aboriginal Australians who I know you've spoken to, who are concerned by what they see as overreach in this treaty. One of the things that really concerned me and shocked me actually when I saw the outline of the treaty was that the Victorian government, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they want to make it a priority for land currently used for church purposes to be handed over to traditional owners. Now, that just really did shock me actually. But I know you've consulted with a diverse group of people on this, and I also know, as I said in my introduction, that your heart is for the good of every single Australian. So explain to us, first of all, why do you think we should be concerned by this treaty?
Yeah, definitely. To put it in a nutshell, is a long story. We definitely care about the Indigenous people, but of course we also care about every Victorian. Is because what the Bible says is we shouldn't have favoritism on any other people. Everyone is equal under the Lord. There is neither female or male, neither slave or free, neither Jews or Gentiles. Everybody is equal. But this treaty is definitely going to put different people into different groups, different race. And of course, under this treaty, we'll be putting Indigenous people as one group with special privileges, and other Victorians just not only have to go along, but also a lot of things will be changed, impacting their life, education, and including is going to change our Westminster parliamentary structure and process altogether. And even perhaps ACL lobbying work will be impacted as well, because there is one voice that they are going to put into Parliament is act like a third chamber or another assembly that perhaps ACL in the near future, we might want to consult with them in a lot of things as well. We can go into more details why that is the case.
Yeah, so can I ask you, has this already been passed, or are we looking at this being passed?
At the moment, we have a statewide treaty bill sitting in the Parliament. Is already gone through the second reading. So when the Parliament resumes in 2 weeks' time, it will be debated. But unfortunately, this bill is going to sail through in both the legislation assembly and also the council, is because of the crossbenchers in the upper house. They are all for it. So unfortunately, it will go through. Now we are hoping that the opposition is saying that they are going to oppose it. They have huge concern about that. But what we hope is that they will also make a commitment to repeal it if they can form government next year.
You would have heard in my introduction, I've got Mark Leach coming on after this, and he's going to be speaking about the anti-Semitism in Australia. One of the things that he talks about in relation to that is that in Australia, what he sees and what he's concerned about is that we are becoming tribal. So we're becoming parts of tribes instead of being all Australian. That's obviously one of your concerns. Can you just give us some idea of how this is going to work? Like what are your main concerns?
Yeah, there are two things that is pretty common: closing the gap and also self-determination. So what this treaty has been advocating for is to help the Indigenous community to have the ability to self-determine. So when we talk about self-determination, we assume that it is, helping them and empowering them to self-care, care for themselves in terms of education, in health issue, and different things. But what Dr. Anthony Dillon has a different definition and explanation. What he means self-determination is actually, instead of individual self-care, is actually a collective or a tribal self-care. So what it means is that they are actually going to separate Indigenous community into one group, giving them all the different kind of services that is different from the everyday Victorians, and also give them perhaps different kind of privileges like welfare, or like the royalty is giving different kind of fundings or money based on reparation and all those things. And at the end, Dr. Dillon said, this is not self-determination. This is actually separatism. So separate them from the other Victorians. And another Northern Territory MPs who is also Indigenous, Alison Anderson, she's actually saying that, in order to help Indigenous community and in order to close the gap, you can't treat them differently. They actually need to have the same type of education, same type of healthcare, and same type of everything. It's just that in order to help them and empower Indigenous people, they really need to be treated like ordinary, everyday Australians and not to separate them.
And Dr. Anthony Dillon, who you mentioned, is a very prominent Aboriginal academic, so that's really helpful, his comments. So I just wonder, I mentioned one of the treaty's demands in the intro. What other sort of demands is the treaty making?
There are quite a few demands based on this very first treaty, and in the statewide treaty agreement, the one that we have at the moment, they actually say that they are the immediate demands. Now, I just want to explain immediate a little bit more, is because what it means is that actually this treaty that we have, now after they pass the statewide treaty bill, all this treaty will be implemented. And what we have negotiated at the moment, 5 demands in this first treaty, is not, that's all. It's only the first or the beginning of ongoing treaties. What it means is that is more to come. Now, I just want to quote one of the line from this treaty agreement that say, the statewide treaty is an ongoing process. Ongoing statewide treaty making will enable Geelong War and the state to continue to negotiate the transfer of decision-making, rule-making, advisory, and other powers and functions from government to Geelong War. Now, Geelong War is the one Indigenous powerful voice, not only in the Parliament, but is actually overlooking the whole government in the near future. Now, the demands that they are going to put forward at the moment as the immediate treaty is to have a formal apology that is different from Kevin's sorry. They want more from that. And another thing they are looking for is to have formal recognition of the Indigenous body and treaty by displaying Indigenous flag, ensuring Indigenous assembly participation in the ceremonial life of the state, written into event protocols, and also re-educate all the public servants, and also make Geelong War one of the naming authority, because they are intend to rename a lot more places. Now, one of the most concerning one is to embed truth-telling in Victorian school curriculum. What it means is that they are going to change the curriculum, especially the history subject, so that all Victorian children from prep to year 10 would be taught Australian history exclusively from an Indigenous perspective, emphasizing the enduring harms of colonization, describing Australia as invaded and the land as stolen, while disregarding the progress and development brought by the British settlement. So this is the most concerning thing, is because in a way, this truth-telling is getting to our future generation. When they grow up, to be honest, in a few years' time, they will either have distorted view about our modern-day Australian history, or they will have little or have no understanding of the rich Christian heritage brought by the British settlers in a few years' time.
So, I mean, of course we want truth to be told. We want the full truth to be told, don't we? When I want to go back to the Jalangwal, is that how you said it? Who elects the Jalangwal? How do we get the Jalangwal?
That is a very interesting question. Definitely is not elected by everyday Victorians. So in Victoria, we only have a small population of Indigenous people. And only within themselves, there are only a small percentage of them are electing people to represent them. So actually, those are the people who elect who is sitting in the Jurong Wall and who is sitting in the First People's Assembly. So you can say, or we can say from a democratic system, that they are not the elected people like the MPs that we have.
Okay, so that concerns me, because I think that our system of democracy is that the people get to decide who rules and who tells us what to do, and we're able to actually vote them out if we don't like what they do, and it's a majority sort of decision. So will there be any sort of democratic way of voting that out? Is there any sort of democratic way of voting the Jalangwal out or change?
Not us.
Definitely
not Victorians. And even the parliamentarians, they don't have the say about that. So how it works at the moment, once the statewide treaty bill is passed, this Jurong Wall, what it means is actually the tips of the spear. It will become a very powerful Indigenous voice. And within this Jurong Wall, there are three smaller Indigenous body. One is actually the First People's Assembly. Now, we have to pay attention to this one. This First People Assembly function like a political arm inside the Victorian Parliament. And they are actually, as I mentioned before, they will operate like a third chamber alongside the Legislative Assembly and Council. And they are actually given a designated parliamentary office in our Parliament. And whatever bill or future bill or policy that is directly related to the Indigenous people must be consulted with them. Now, although they say that, whatever they come back with an advice is not binding and they don't have any veto power, or they are not going to be coercive, but regardless, we will see that they will be going to be very powerful and very influential. Now, even though they don't have those veto power or they wouldn't be coercive, you can imagine that who dares to go against their advice or consultation, and definitely not the Allen government at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the problems with what you just said as well is that they want to be able to comment and veto any bill that relates to the Aboriginal people, but surely every bill relates to the Aboriginal people, because every bill relates to every Australian in Victoria. Yeah. So there's not a certain select number of bills that are related to one group of people. They relate to all people, don't they?
The very first thing is already see that what they want to change is already impacting our future generation. That is the education. Now, they always work on housing, health issue, justice issue, and education issue, and even naming the places, changing the names of different places. This seems to be directly impacting them, but even Anthony Dillon asked the same questions. How is this not impacting other Victorians as well? So this is the thing. Victorians really need to ask the Allen government these questions. What issue truly affects only Indigenous people and not everyday Victorians? And even, this is another question that we need to ask. Will Victorians be governed by the unelected Geelong War, or by the MPs elected by the people of Victoria? And even with this shift in parliamentary structure and process, I will have a concern that would there be a change in the relationship between constituents and their MPs, and would that undermine a democracy? So there is a huge issue in terms of governance. So you mentioned the implication. I would say, on one hand, it would definitely going to change the governance of Victoria forever, and also change the culture of Victoria forever, not to mention education.
Yeah, so, I mean, the concern for me is that, as I said at the beginning, I've been to the Indigenous communities and I've seen the need for healthcare, and I guess I just wonder, is this just another level of sort of bureaucracy, I guess, that is not actually helping the people who need the help most out in community, who actually are needing, they're needing more healthcare, they're needing more doctors, they're needing better clinics. And this seems to be a lot of money spent on inner city Parliament sort of stuff that is not really going to help the people who need it.
It's more than bureaucracy, unfortunately, Wendy. When you look at the statement that I read out, treaty agreement just now, they were talking about transfer of decision-making, rule-making, other powers and women to Geelong War. What my gut feeling is that is more than helping the Indigenous community. In fact, they is sort of like, I don't like the word, but we might want to call it out. It might be power grab, and in the near future, it might be money grab. Now, again, Dr. Anthony Dillon talk about closing the gap. This is why we support some of the Indigenous initiative, and we want to really close the gap. One interesting thing that I find from the conversation with Dr. Dillon is that he actually said that, the true gap or the real gap is not between us non-Indigenous people and the Indigenous people. What he actually said that the real gap is actually those Indigenous people who are doing really well and successful, and those who are still struggling. And so he actually questioned those who are in the Euro Commission. They seem to be doing so well, unimpacted by the colonization that they have been talking about. So why are some of the Indigenous people so successful and so doing so well, but not others? And he is actually right. We really need to see what is the problem in between, and there is how we should close the gap and help those Indigenous people that are not doing so well and excel and be really doing as good as those who are successful already.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but if we can just look at very briefly, there's another report that actually, another review anyway, that came out at the same time, and it's the multicultural review. So this is on the back of a move, I guess, from the Victorian government wanting to tackle anti-Semitism and the social division that's there. I mean, we're seeing marches every weekend right around the nation. And so what are they trying to do here? And is this a good thing, or is this not such a good thing?
I would say it's not a good thing. I'm just concerned that where our state is going to from here is because Allen government seems to put Indigenous voice really high, and another hand is the multicultural voice. I would see it as a voice is because what she is intending to do, definitely he is trying to promote social cohesion. She has already passed the anti-vilification law and also set up anti-hate task force and anti-racism task force. And this multicultural Victoria is another thing. So in her statement, in a media release, what she's saying is that the Premier will lead a new whole of government multicultural strategy to elevate community needs across all portfolios, and will require multicultural needs to be considered in all cabinet decision making. Now, what it means is that multicultural policies will be taking a very prominent role in the future legislation and policy making. Now, we have this Indigenous voice, and now these multicultural policies. So what it means is that our legislation and policy will be driven by this. And then where is our Western civilization and Christian values and culture, Christian voice come from then? So there is a very concerning thing. We don't know where our state is going to head to.
So one thing that I did see that you made a comment about was that the report acknowledged that more than 50% of Victorians are affiliated with a religion. So, I mean, that is a small positive, I guess, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. So this is one of the positive. And this report actually quote ACL submission and acknowledge that some of the faith community has been overlooked in the past, perhaps 10 years. So this is one thing that I think we can, as ACL, we can capitalize on, just get to the government and say, hey, Christian are faith group as well. And we have Christian organization. So we can't be overlooked as well.
So good. ACL do an amazing work, Jazz. You do an amazing work in Victoria and under pretty tough circumstances. If anybody listening wants to look at more from ACL, just go to acl.org.au. I really do recommend that you sign up to get their weekly email. I know you get a lot of emails, but this is one that you can look at sometimes, and other times if you're too busy, you can let it go through to the keeper. But acl.org.au. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us today, and it's just been a real delight for me to just talk to a good friend.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.